Remember getting 1 week off?
No.
No?
It's a chag, we're off. 2 weeks. Have to wait till this guy gets on.
11 o'clock. I was supposed to be there something like that.
He got delayed?
Yeah, sorry?
Well, you got your, Rabbi Sharpman has a lecture on Nishkabah.
Nishkabra.
Yeah.
I have it.
Nish Shabbos Geret and Nishkabra.
He said it was the invention of the Lubavitch.
Really?
Yes, and that's the last time the Lubavitch convinced all the other Hasidim to go along with them.
Okay, I think that means we're live. Okay. Let me grab the guy here. Okay, good morning. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to this special shir. Last shir we're going to have before Pesach. We're going hiatus for a couple weeks. So today's shir is entitled At Rav Chaim Kanievsky's Seder. And in the past we have given the shirim describing the anhagos of Gedolim at their Seder. And I thought it was appropriate this year, after Chaim was nifter, to give a shir about his anhagos. You know, definitely from what I've seen across the world after Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal passed away, the outpouring of love and kavod Torah that you see in the world is unbelievable. I don't believe there's a major Jewish city in the world which hasn't had as a hesped, a gathering to express their grief over the death of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Across the Jewish world, America, Israel, I think I saw Australia, everywhere. South Africa. Jews gathered together to mourn the death of Reb Chaim. And that itself, you see, it's across the board. Ashkenazim, Sfardim, Litvish, Hasidish, people have gebraks who don't have gebraks. All types have been mourning the death of Reb Chaim. And I think firstly that's out of respect for Reb Chaim's tremendous knowledge of Torah. He was somebody that had an absolute mastery of Kol Torah Kula. Now these questions, Rabbi Shapiro has been telling over stories of Reb Chaim Kanievsky for years. What takes one step, he goes through all of Bavli. His next step, all of Yerushalmi. Like you say those words, the words are cheap, but to see his total command of the topic, to chazer and review it again and again, it's unbelievable. His tremendous knowledge and his zechira, his memory, that he was able to keep it all. But I think there's a second reason why Reb Chaim Kanievsky, in his lifetime and also now, post that, has been very popular across all facets. And it's something, if you read stories, Reb Chaim Kanievsky was able to connect with Jews of all stripes and colors. You didn't have to be Litvish and go to yeshiva. Reb Chaim Kanievsky connected with Ashkenazim, Sfardim, Dati Lumi, Modern Orthodox, whatever you call it. People felt connected to Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim did so much for them. Even people not from. There's so many stories across Israeli secular media of fathers of soldiers and different things that connected with Reb Chaim and walked away so impressed. I have to tell you a personal story, amazing story. 8 years ago, the yeshiva here sent me with a group of Talmidim to go to Eretz Yisrael. And with tremendous hashkacha pratis, somehow someone said, they'll be able to get us into Reb Chaim. So we went to Reb Chaim. At that point, they already built this bridge from his house to his shul next door, Letterman Shul, where he could just walk across the bridge. And we were supposed to come and daven with Reb Chaim, Mincha, and then after Mincha we would get in. And Baruch Hashem, it worked out. We actually davened for Chaim. Chaim had a stender, not in the front of the Beis Medrash, but in the middle of the Beis Medrash. We watched him daven. After davening, I guess I was a spokesman. I was the Rebbe. And I introduced the Talmidim from Miami. You know what Chaim's first words were? Was heißt Miami? What is Miami? Chaim Kanievsky had no clue what Miami is. You know, you hear all these stories, it's not a chiddush. You didn't know the streets of Bnei Brak. You want him to know Miami? Was heißt Miami? There's no Gemara. Nowhere in the Torah, now we have a proof. Nowhere in the Torah does it mention Miami. And Baruch Hashem, he gave us a beautiful bracha, a full bracha of Hatzlacha.
You know what it was? You should have said Miami.
Lamaisa. But that's only half the story. While we were all waiting there with a big crowd outside his house, waiting to catch a glimpse of him walking across the bridge from his house into the shul, we were waiting. We knew Mincha wasn't going to start till he came. So we were waiting outside. As we were waiting outside, part of a whole group, it wasn't just Talmidim and Yeshiva, it was other people. All of a sudden, a taxi pulls up right to the house, and a group of people get ushered in from the taxi straight into the house. It seems earlier that day, Reb Chaim was a sandik at a bris, which is something he did quite a bit. And the family of the bris, he went to that bris because he had a second bris after that, and he rushed out right after the bris. He didn't have a chance to give brachas personally to the whole family. So he told them, if you want, come before mincha, I'll give you brachas. So these people came in their taxi. They're walking up the steps, ushered into Reb Chaim's house. Big stuff. All of a sudden, as they walk up the steps, a guy calls out, Rabbi Kier, what are you doing here? True story. It was a friend of mine's father. My high school Sifta class, hadn't seen him in 20 years. He recognized me. What are you doing here? Come with me. We're going into Reb Chaim. So, like any good opportunist, I left my Talmidim right there. I jumped upstairs. There was another Rebbe with them. I jumped upstairs. I'm getting in to go with Reb Chaim. Got inside the house. Just share one story. Inside the house, it wasn't part of the, it was a private time. It wasn't an official time that people are seeing them. He was meeting with his family. The grandfather, grew up in Kew Garden Hills, nice fellow, wears a nice white kippah sruga. The amount of respect and connection that Reb Chaim had with this grandfather, Reb Chaim Kanievsky started joking around. He says, who are you? He says, I'm the Saba. He says, so he starts laughing. Atazakeni, you're the old man. And starts joking with him. You're the grandfather, you're a Saba, you're an old guy. Right? Well, he was younger than Reb Chaim. But, Reb Chaim had his way of connecting with people. And I think that's something why there's such an outpouring. So many people, whether it was through letters or going to Eretz Yisrael, had the chance to meet Reb Chaim. There's, the Reb Chaim's Svarim are flying off the shelves. The day he was nifter, I made sure to grab, I think, the last copy of one of his Svarim I found in a Lakewood store. They said, no, don't worry, we have 20 copies. I said, you're not going to have them. Can you please put one away from me? So that's how I got it. Reb Chaim is somebody tremendously respected, and I think today we can learn so much from different hanhagas that are in print, that are relatable for us at the Seder. Of course, everyone has their own minhagim at the Seder, but there's a lot still to learn. There's so many areas we don't clearly have our own minhag and way of doing things. And it could be, we'll see, there's some things, maybe Reb Chaim's minhag is better. So I would like to take us all on a trip to, I believe, 23 Rashbam, Reb Chaim's house. And as Baruch Hashem, I myself was zocha a few times to be behind the curtain inside his house to share some things about it. Before I begin, I'll tell one other story of Hashgacha Pratis. I had the zchus of being in Eretz Yisrael one time for Pesach. I was in Kolol, and my wife's grandparents, Rabbi and Rebbetzin Neumann, Zatzal, went to Eretz Yisrael, and my family got to come along. I remember I was by the farm stores with my Zaidi, Rabbi Neumann, and he saw this Haggadah. Just came out, it was a brand new Haggadah that year. 17 years ago, Haggadah of the Stipler, Reb Chaim's father. And in fact, already then, though the Stipler's face covers the cover, the inner cover, you have these two spooky pictures of the Stipler together with Reb Chaim. And the lot that's in the Sefer is quoted from Reb Chaim. And anyone who knows anything about Reb Chaim Kanievsky is he very much kept all the anhagos of his father. If his father did it, for the most part, you can be rest assured that he did it. When it comes to anhagas and halacha, minhagim, customs of things to do, Reb Chaim very much followed his father. So this, our school also happens to have a Reb Chaim Kanievsky Haggadah, also verifying what Reb Chaim himself did. So between these and others that I've heard, we hope to put together a share today. So the first part I would like to talk about is before really the Seder begins. I call it pre-yontiv preparation. Let's talk about B'dikas Chametz, right? This year we're going to do B'dikas Chametz on Thursday night. And I'll give you this disclaimer. I'm not telling you to try this at home. Your wife might be, you'll see. Right? I definitely will tell you Rebbetzin Kanievsky's minhagim. That's, she didn't start cooking for Pesach till after her husband performed the B'dika and said that everything was clear of Chametz. So that means until the B'dikas Chametz was finished in that night, that's when she started cooking for Pesach. Wow. She stayed up all night, Erev Pesach, cooking for Pesach. Now, that's a Rebbetzin Kanievsky share. Today's share is on Reb Chaim.
Does my wife shouldn't know that?
Yes, right? I'll have them edit that part out of the video. But the Stipler himself spent many hours doing B'dikas Chametz. B'dikas Chametz was something taken very seriously in the house of the Stipler, so much so, you don't find this too many other places. The Stipler's brother-in-law, the Chazon Ish, who was viewed as the head of the family, the Chazon Ish once saw how much time the Stipler was spending on B'dikas Chametz and made some comments that maybe he should scale it back a little bit. Felt it was even too intense. But the Stipler spent hours and hours. I think the Stipler, they have stories, they stayed up all night doing B'dikas Chametz. So it seems, by the time, the numbers I have here for Chaim Kanievsky was probably post the Chazon Ish's Azharas to scale it back. They say that Chaim Kanievsky spent 3 hours or so on B'dikas Chametz. Only 3 hours. Okay, it wasn't the whole night, just 3 hours. Also had to give his wife time to cook. Spent 3 hours. It wasn't just 3 hours. 3 hours on his hands and knees, looking all over the house for chametz. A sight to see. Chaim Kanievsky crossed the floor, looking for chametz.
Yeah, small house.
And that's exactly the point. There's a story which you're about to tell me. There's a story. There's multiple stories. He would visit all his grandchildren once they got married and had a place. He'd go visit the grandchildren as a kavod after they got married. So he comes to somebody and he sees they have a very long hallway. What's on his mind when he visits them in Tishrei, their new apartment? Oh, I don't know how you're going to be able to do B'dikas Chametz on this long hallway. Boy, this is trouble. He was very nervous of B'dikas Chametz. They say after the Hurricane Sandy hit New York, so someone was explaining to Reb Chaim the tremendous damage that happened, unfortunately, to a lot of Jews. And he was explaining people had these houses, they had 8 bedrooms, and they were totally, destroyed by the storm. Reb Chaim says, 8 bedrooms? He said, yeah, big houses, 8 bedrooms. He's like, how do they do B'dikas Chametz in America? His view of a house, there's actually a Shal Tshuva, someone asked him a question between buying 2 apartments, one bigger than the other. He actually recommended buying the smaller one. So it'd be easier to fulfill the din of B'dikas Chametz. Other Shalos, what's an apartment? Where are you going to put the mezuzahs? Where the menorah is going to go? That's how he viewed everything from the prism of halacha. So B'dikas Chametz, that's a big deal. It's a cheshbon. Even one year, someone got him new chairs for Pesach. I don't care the new chairs. He went looking in the chairs. Someone asked, do this. He said, look, marba nechasim, marba daiga. You got more possessions, you have more to worry about. So Rav Chaim would have this mindset of everything he did, is this going to make more problems? Going to make bedikas chametz harder, and he took it quite seriously. Now, one other story I'll just share with you, bedikas chametz. So, in the later years, obviously he didn't do bedikas chametz by himself. He had grandchildren come and help him, grandsons. So he would tell them to take the things out of the cabinets, so we could search through the cabinets and then put it back. But he warned his grandsons very clearly, when you put back the things into the cabinet, make sure to put it back exactly the same way it was in. I said, Zaidi, we have a lot to do. What's the big deal? He says, very simple. Bedikas chametz is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. But not causing pain to your grandmother, to Bubby, that's a d'oraisa. That takes precedence. So you're doing your bedikas chametz. Don't make more of a mess than what it was before. Put things back exactly where they were. Tremendous balance. He did everything he had to do, but kol Torah kula, bein al makom ival chaviro were in front of his eyes. Moving on to Erev Pesach itself. So Reb Chaim did his famous siyumim. Reb Chaim was a Bukhar, and it seems for as long as anyone could remember, Reb Chaim always made siyums. If you daven nates at the Letterman shul, for sure in the olden days, after davening, who would be the one making the siyum? Chaim Kanievsky. But the truth was, he only made a siyum in Letterman shul on Shas Bavli. That's all. Got up, made a siyum, the last Gemara in Maseches Nida, finished Shas Bavli, and made a siyum. It seems his siyum on Yerushalmi and the rest of what they call Kol Torah Kula, that was reserved when he came home the morning of Erev Pesach, then he would make a second siyum. I'm not sure why he split it up. It could be his Rebbitzin. Many mornings she would actually daven with him in Letterman's, but it could be an Erev Pesach. She was busy cooking, so he wanted to make a siyum with his wife. I'm not sure, but he split up his siyum. This famous Kol Torah siyum was actually in two parts: Bavli in Letterman's and Yerushalmi and everything else in his house. Okay, again, don't try this at home. There's some story of once of a bacher came to the stipler and asked him, said, no, is there any way I could be yotze without a siyum in this? The stipler says, come, I have to look into the shah, come back to me in an hour. He came back to him in an hour, the stipler says, okay, we're about to finish Maseches Talmud. In that hour, the stipler made a siyum for that person asking the question. Now, one other interesting story, we've talked about this in the past years past, about how to arrange one's kara, one's Seder plate. We know there are different minhagim on how to do it. What was the minhag in the Chaim Kanievsky's home? If you were there behind the curtain, what did you see? How did the Seder plate look? Maybe today somebody will sell you the Seder plate of Chaim Kanievsky. So it's a knockoff, it's not real. I'll tell you what. Seems it was only 1 year, that the Kanievsky family, from the stipler, was zocha to host the Chazon Ish for the Seder. So the Chazon Ish was coming for the Seder. They asked the Chazon Ish, how should we arrange a Seder plate? Chazon Ish's answer, doesn't really matter. As long as everything is there. So thus, in the Kanievsky home, it didn't really matter how you arrange a Seder plate. That's what the Chazon Ish said. It's good to know. Yes. Now let's begin the Seder. The first thing, what's the first part of the Seder? This year, last week's share was, why is this night different? Pesach on a Friday night. What's the first part of the Seder? Kadesh. Not in the Kanievsky home. It's not the first part of the Seder. Chaim Kanievsky, when Pesach began on Friday night, would sing Shalom Aleichem and Eishes Chaya. That's how he began the Seder. In fact, I was thinking about it. There are different minhagim people have on the yontif. Do you sing Shalom Aleichem? Do you not sing Shalom Aleichem? You know, how many stanzas of Lechadodi do you sing? Do you not sing Lechadodi? Like, there are different minhagim, we know. But I was thinking about it. You know, this is my personal aside. If ever there is a night of the year, it's Kedai to sing Eishes Chayil. It's probably the night of the Seder. Probably.
Even when it's not Shabbos.
Right, even when it's not Shabbos. Okay.
Maybe you could do it before sundown.
Right. But I don't want to get in on years when it's not Shabbos. I don't want to start new minhagim.
It doesn't rhyme with the other stuff.
Yeah, okay, right. The kids are ready to go with Kaddish Orchatz. The Morah didn't teach them to sing Eishes Chayil. Maybe they should. But just to put it out there, Chaim Kanievsky did sing both Shalom Aleichem and Eishes Chayil this year when Pesach comes out on a Friday. What happened next? Very interesting. Okay, I'm not going to start up with that grandpa because he told me already what he does on Pesach. But, so, when do, grandparents like giving out candy?
Always.
Right? I forgot one of the family get-togethers we have. Someone fills up El Yohan. I think that's our minhag. We fill up El Yohanovi's cup for the first part of the meal with candy. By the second part of the meal, it's usually empty, and that's where we put in the wine for El Yohanovi. But the first part, we have this huge cup. We have a nice El Yohanovi cup, and it's filled with candy. And we dish it out. So normally, when do you dish it out? Oh, you said the Manashtana, well, here, have a candy. You did this? Have a candy. Reb Chaim didn't do that. Well, he did, but you have to see when he did it. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, as soon as the Seder started, which I guess this year would maybe even before Shalom Aleichem or before Kaddish, one of the two, started giving out candy. Before anyone said boo. The kids didn't, quote unquote, earn it yet. He's already giving out candy. Anyone hear such a minhag? The moment the Seder begins, start dishing out candy. As an educator, that's the thing. What do you mean? What's separating me and a hostile takeover by the kids is that candy. Like, you can give it over for free, you got to earn it, right? Not by Reb Chaim. Chaim gave out the candy right away. Where? So look at the halacha. If you look on your sheets, in the middle of the page, Os Beis. This is Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Tuf Ayin Beis. Mechaber writes, Mitzvah l'chal kitinosos, kloyos v'agozim, k'dei sheyirashino v'yishalu. It's a mitzvah to give out nuts, candies to kids in order they should see something different and they should ask questions. Now, even from the words of the Mechaber, I already see it. But look at how the Chavetz Chaim writes it. Chavetz Chaim writes, Ratza Lomar. This is what the Mechaber means to say. By you giving out candy, you're going to get their attention, and they're going to start to focus on all the things different about tonight versus the rest of the year. And they'll come to ask the questions that we have in the language of our Manashtana. So really, this is the ultimate chinuch lesson. You want to get their attention, and they should see things are different, and they should start to ask. Not rewarding them once they ask. You're encouraging them and sparking them to start. So Reb Chaim gave this out. He says, this is mashma in the Mishnah Berurah. He says his father also did this, is they gave out candy before. Now, that's a minhag anyone could do. Start dishing out the candy before. That's what Reb Chaim says. It's the halacha. That's what the Mechaber is saying. The Mishnah Berurah says it beferish. Very interesting. People don't know this. Now, okay, so Reb Chaim gave out the candy. Kids are eating candy before Kiddush. Uh-oh. Right? Fine. What happens next? Kiddush. Okay, so let's go through a few things in Kiddush. Coming off last week's share. What do you think? How big a cup do you think Reb Chaim Kanievsky had? Smart fella. Reb Chaim Kanievsky followed the Chazon Ish size of having a becher 5.1 ounces.
What would he have done if they weren't family?
Chazon Ish is of Chaim's Rebbe. 5.1 Pashet. The Kanievsky family went with that. We mentioned last week there's a bigger share. Some of the briskers, we saw Shmuel Kanievsky Shlita does 6 ounces, but no, Chaim did 5.1 like the Chazon Ish. What did he do? What type of cup did he have? I remember years ago there was a story. One of Rabbi Chaim's silver bechers got stolen. He used to make this siyum shas and siyum kol Torah kula with this becher, right? Which actually, now that we know the story, I think it was the becher from his house. So I don't know what he used when he made the siyum in Letterman Shul. It was a different becher. So even the Gan of them got one, they didn't get the other. It's 2 bechers. But Chaim Kanievsky had a silver becher that he used for siyumim, special for siyumim. Okay, he had a silver becher that he used to make kiddush every Shabbos. But on the night of Pesach, Chaim Kanievsky used a clear glass cup, and there's a makor, I believe in Shulchan Aruch, to see the wine. This is what his father, the Stipler, did, and he therefore had a clear glass cup during the Seder. Fascinating, right? Let's see if they start selling those. For those of us who we already started talking about last week, it's hard to drink the full wine. How do you do things? You mix. So here's Reb Chaim's mix. For cups 1 and 4, he drank straight wine, but 2 and 3 he diluted. And obviously the reason why he diluted was it was too much for him. I don't know which stage in life this minhag came about, but 1 and 4 he didn't drink straight, 2 and 3 he diluted. I was wondering, okay, the first one, why did he do straight? I assume A, because Kiddush, and B, it didn't hit him yet. Well, by 2, it will hit him if he drank it straight.
It's its own ikar mitzvah.
Did he dilute it with grape juice or with
I'm not sure. Good question, right?
What percentage was the wine to start with?
At the checkup, right? He worked out his percentages and everything was fine.
Right.
But what did he do? Why the 4th? Why would he drink the 4th straight?
It's a bracha.
Kosher bracha. It's really the 3rd one's a berachos hamazon.
No, not the kosher bracha itself, but the after bracha.
Right. Yeah. So I assume that's pshat. Excellent, Josh. I assume the reason why he decided to drink the 4th straight is since you're making an al-geffen afterwards, he wanted to make sure that he had enough wine content. So that's when he did that one straight. It could also be that after that one, if it knocked him out, it knocked him out. Yes.
use non-unusual wine?
Great question. I did not see in print if Reb Chaim did non-nevushal wine. I assume he did. Assuming non-nevushal because there is a milah in doing that. I assume that Reb Chaim did have that too. Great point. Now, we know you have to drink the 4 cups of wine, beheseba, to lean. And we'll see, the Shulchan Aruch discusses in machlokas, do women lean? Well, the Mechaber brings, Isha ina tzricha heseba, a woman doesn't need, this is in the middle of your sheets, doesn't need to lean. El imkin hi chashuva, unless she's chashuv. Haga comes the Ramah, v'chol anashim shalonu mikri chashuvos. All of our women are considered chashuvos. So Chaim went like the Ramah, and he said, yeah, women do lean. But obviously this is a very strange machlokas. The Mechaber says women don't lean, but it comes to Ramah and says, unless they're chashuv, and the Ramah makes this funny comment, all of our women are chashuv. There's a lot of Torah, right? I'm not going to do some, right. It's a slap in the face to Sephardi women, okay. But Reb Chaim had a very interesting take on this, right? The classic joke people make is you see Ashkenazim treat their wives better than Sephardim. Sephardim go, Mechaber, their women are not chashuv. Ashkenazim say they are. Reb Chaim said it a little bit better. Chaim says the Ramah was after Rabbeinu Gershom. In the Sephardi world, who never accepted Rabbeinu Gerish, Chaim de Rabbeinu Gerishim, so this is Daf Yomi, Yavamos Tsaros. You could have multiple wives. As the Gemara refers to, multiple wives are Tsaros. They're rough to each other. But by the Ashkenazim, they have Rabbeinu Gershom. Our women are choshev. You get married, one at a time. Only one wife. So that's why our women could do Haseva. Chaim said that tongue-in-cheek, right? Half of it is a joke, but again, Chaim's perspective in Torah, his jokes are quite interesting too. Right before he would do Yachatz, Chaim would make an announcement. In our family, we don't teach children to steal. There's no stealing of the Afikomen. Kalmi, do you hear that?
What?
You can't steal the Afikomen in the Kanievsky home.
What do you do?
They're against it. I remember years ago, I think we went to send this over, in the Kanievsky home, or Rabbi Yaakov's home. I don't know all the grandkids and all the great-grandkids, if they're all makbid in it, but also Rabbi Yaakov also was against stealing the Afikomen. You know,
What if the parents give
right?
you
It's one thing. Okay, if they give you permission, maybe it's different, right? But I wouldn't recommend if your family has been stealing the Afikomen for years and all of a sudden you came up with a new chumrah from the Chaim Kanievsky. I don't know. That's going to go down so well. But in the Kanievsky family, they didn't steal the Afikomen. Manashtana. This is one of the most fascinating things I saw. So, it's time to ask Manashtana. I'm sure all the Kanievsky, Kananahara grandkids were all excited to ask. They already got their candy from the beginning of the Seder. They're all about ready to ask. What does Reb Chaim Kanievsky do? It's up to Manashtana. What does he do? He turns to his son, who's sitting at the table, and instructs him, you say Manashtana. His son was a grandfather.
Not the youngest.
Right?
Yeah.
Because by Reb Chaim's table, his son is always his son. Didn't matter if he's a grandfather, didn't matter how old he is. You start. You say the Manashtana first.
That sounds like my father who treated me like I was...
He always treated you as a kid.
12 years old.
Yeah. No, but it's a certain perspective. It's quite fascinating. Right? No matter how old you are, you're sitting at your father's table. Kana ben Shoel. Now the son asks, okay, my son, Chaim Kanievsky had a wonderful relation with his children. He spent a lot of time learning with all his children, teaching his children.
Are grandkids considered banim also?
Yeah, tell me, grand b'nei banim hareim kebanim. But it's a lumdus. It's not a generation. Reb Chaim would turn to his son, who was already a grandfather, and say, okay, it's your turn to frek the Manashtana. Okay, I'm sure the other kids ask after. But it's a beautiful perspective of the picture of what a Seder is, of generations and generations gathered together. You know, you have the schus to have a great-grandfather. And in the Kanievsky home, they were very mocked at so many things. When the stipler would be in the house, Reb Chaim would never sit, the stipler, I think, would sit at the head of the table, that's it. The utmost respect for the earlier generations. They knew that. The Chaim's children knew that there wasn't a single thing that happened in the house where my father didn't ask the Zayda, the stipler. When the grandfather was alive, everything went through him. Tremendous, tremendous respect. Okay, that's what I call part one of the Seder. It got us through Magid. I skipped Karpas. I'll just say one line there. Karpas is a whole discussion about how do you do it. I don't know, potato or celery, that I didn't see in print what Reb Chaim had. But what I did find is Reb Chaim ate a full kazayas, and he didn't say a bracha achrona. Just for the record. Yeah. I do know, it's probably a good chance he had potatoes. I do know that Reb Chaim had a little meal before the Seder. It's also a very smart thing. You know, if the first time, Erev Pesach could be a busy day. If you end up the first thing you're going to have is 2 cups of wine, some matzah and maror before you have a Suda, probably won't do, wonders to your body and your head. It's a smart idea to have a little Suda, beforehand, before you go to Shul, before Mincha, something to eat. Obviously, you can't wash. There's no matzah. And it seems Rav Chaim would dafka have like potatoes for that pre-yontif, little meal, because the Lashon says you can't eat chametz or matzah. It means you have to eat fruits and vegetables, so he would have potatoes.
I thought you were supposed to go in hungry, so that you eat the matzah.
Correct.
With relish.
Correct. You are supposed to go in hungry. I have to be careful how I say it. You're 100% right. Right? You're supposed to go in to the Seder hungry to eat matzah, but that goes about by you not eating matzah for whatever amount of time, where different people know different times, an isser of minhag of not to eat matzah. So you're hungry to have the matzah, but it doesn't mean you're fasting. It doesn't mean you're famished. You definitely eat food, and it's probably healthy and a good idea to have something, beforehand. So Chaim has potatoes. Now, yes.
Well, maybe there has to be a specific time frame within which you shouldn't be eating. So I'm saying that maybe I'm just wondering.
But the idea of eating before mincha, before suda, that's a bread meal. He was having potatoes. That's okay.
The potatoes is carb.
So I'm wondering. I know the Rebbe made lots of potatoes. They're Pesach, I can tell you.
So that's a cooked potato or what?
Yeah. Okay. Part 2. Let's jump to the Maggid itself. Reb Chaim did the Haggadah relatively quick. In fact, he said, people do spend a lot of time with different Divrei Torah and this. He's like, look, just like everything else we have in the Torah, our Chazal gave us a shir. They gave us the entire Haggadah. This is what you're supposed to say. So to add on it, like who's to say we should add so much to the shir? He would add, little bits within explaining the Haggadah, but for the most part, he tried to stick to the script of the Haggadah and went relatively quick. Now, there's also cheshbonos. We talked about that last week. To have the afikomen before chatzos, to have the 4 cups before chatzos. At the same time, you have to balance. If you're at a Seder and your wife has slaved for weeks to get to there, she doesn't want to be over chick-chock. She wants to hear every Devar Torah that the kids have prepared from school. Okay, you could sometimes work out the kids. We could say a Devar Torah every meal of Yom Tov, or work it out. But the Stipler did go through Maggid relatively quick. Now we get to matzah, motzi matzah. Now, firstly, what type of matzahs did he have? Hand matzahs. It's interesting. It was a culture clash when he got married. His Rebbetzin Elyashiv in Yerushalayim. In those days, the Haredi community. This is pre the war, pre everything, pre the state of Israel. So the hand matzahs, they weren't so excited about the kashrus of them. There were hand matzahs in there in the old Yerushalayim, but Rav Elyashiv wasn't happy with that. They had machine matzahs. Rav Elyashiv himself would supervise, and Rebbetzin Kanievsky, until she got married, imagine this, growing up in Rav Elyashiv's house in Yerushalayim, she never saw a hand matzah. Only machine matzahs. Okay? Rav Meiser, Rav Chaim, on the Bnei Brak side of things, they were makbid to have dafka hand matzahs, and that's what Rav Chaim used for Pesach. Now there is a discussion, the Mishnah Berurah brings it down, the minimum share is to eat a kazayas, which, okay, you have your charts, you measure. There is an inyan also to have 2 kazesim, okay? For those who do that, there's an inyan to have 2 kazesim. Mishnah Berurah also does talk about idea of having 2 kazesim in your mouth and then swallowing it, which is not an easy thing to do for most people with not such big mouths. And whatever, a lot of yeshivish ways how to do these things. Chaim would not do that. Chaim ate 2 kazesim, but he did not put 2 kazesim in his mouth at the same time. He would eat it, he'd try to eat it as quickly as possible, but no force feeding. Maror.
Is that always or just in the later years?
That sounds like that's what I always did. For Maror, the Kanievsky family would have the real stuff, ground horseradish. It seems the Chazon Ish was not a big fan of romaine lettuce, and certainly not the Baron Cutler's regular lettuce. He felt that what we have nowadays, Niskat Nu Adoros, we talked about the shiurim a couple of weeks ago, right? The shiurim, the size of olives shrunk. Well, the bitterness of lettuce must have also weakened over the generations. And the Chazon says, granted the Gemara might say things, but that's not what we have. Our stuff is not strong enough. Okay? Interesting thing. We know after you have matzah and maror, then we do korech, zeichel mikdash kehillo. We have a sandwich. The normal way, I think that's the way it's in art schools, machzorim, Haggadahs, is when you put your sandwich together, everyone goes and says, okay, I'm eating the sandwich, zeichel mikdash kehillo, kein also hillo, b'zman shbeis mikdash kain. You say that little paragraph, and then you take a bite. Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky did not do it that way. He ate his sandwich. After he ate his sandwich, he said, zeichel mikdash kehillo. And the reason why is because he considered it a hefsek. Because you really want your bracha on the matzah and the maror to go in everything. Which means you really shouldn't talk from the beginning until the end, until you finish your sandwich. So Reb Chaim would say the zeichel mikdash kehillo at the end.
Should we follow
Read it?
Then read it. And people ask, okay, but mine for years I've been doing the other way. Chaim says, okay, so switch. He says, do I have to be mater neder? This is my family minhag. Chaim says, no, you don't need to be mater neder. You only need to be mater neder things which are real. This is the real right way to do it. The right way to do it, Reb Chaim says, to say the zeichel mikdash kehillo at the end. I grew up that way. My father always insisted that we do it afterwards for the same cheshbon. I don't think you heard it from Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But yes, that is something that's brought down. A very interesting thing. A few more quick story. How many cups of wine do they have in the Kanievsky home?
5.
Huh? So, one of the Deir Talmidim, they said they already peaked. If you look on top of your sheet, it's brought down. This is about the stipler, and if the stipler did it, I'm sure Reb Chaim did it. It says Rabbeinu Shasa b'Suda, during the Suda, during the meal, he would have kos chamishish keneged v'ivesi based on the girsa of a rif. There is a shita in Mesachas Psachim of an idea of having a fifth kos. So, the more the merrier. Pun intended. Right? In the Kanievsky home, they had a fifth cup. Now, you say that's a fifth cup. That really, if they had it during the Suda, is really their third cup. But it counts as an extra cup, as a fifth cup. That's what they had. I don't know how Reb Chaim drank that cup, diluted, not diluted. Who knows? Okay. 2 more very interesting announcements that Reb Chaim made towards the end of the Seder. After they drank the 4th kos, which is at the end of Hallel, Reb Chaim would make an announcement. He says, anyone who feels tired could go to sleep right now. Nirtza is just a minhag. Saying shir shirim afterwards is just a minhag. Once you had your 4th cup, you could go to sleep. Right? Huh?
Cleaning off the tables down there.
Oh, okay. All right, clear beforehand. But Chaim Kanievsky would make an announcement after the 4th cup. All tired, please go to bed. Nice guy. Very thoughtful. And more than that, the Lashon the Mechaber talks about is, and after you finish the Seder, you should learn about Hilchos Pesach till sleep catches you and you fall asleep. So, I've seen many yeshiva bachrim take that literally, and they sit there, they won't go to bed, they're sitting there with the Haggadah. Okay, I have to learn whatever they do till I fall asleep. So you end up falling asleep on the couch, and that's how you spend the night of the Seder. Rav Chaim Kanievsky says, if you finish the Seder and you feel tired, that's what the Mechaber means. You're supposed to do Hilchos Pesach until you feel tired. It doesn't mean you literally have to sit there at the stender and conk out there. You could go to bed. Once again, another thoughtful recommendation from Rav Chaim.
What if you don't feel sleepy, but you just want to do it because it's good for you?
Okay, maybe you learn a little.
How many people were at a Seder?
How many people were at the Kanievsky Seder? Great question. I don't know the answer. when his Rebbetzin was alive, she was alive. She used to have a lot of people there. There's a story. There's this Chaverman, this Hasidic guy from Borough Park, an insurance salesman, quite a talker. This guy Friedman. He's actually Avram Kut's uncle from the neighborhood here. I heard him speak. He spoke in Chavetz Chaim in Queens. He spoke in Boca here. He spoke in Letterman Show. A real Chaverman. This guy basically discovered Reb Chaim Kanievsky, 36 years ago, 1984, right before the Stipler was nifter, and fell in love with him. He said, my wife says I'm addicted to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and he would fly to Eretz Yisrael every other month to spend time with him. So much so, like the first time he met him, the Rebbetzin invited him, to the meal. They sat with him during lunch. This thing that Reb Chaim had lunch with his wife. He had lunch with his wife, except when this guy came, he would crash. And he's actually the guy. This is a fascinating story, right? Reb Chaim only knew of Torah, only knew of things in classic halacha. One time, Reb Chaim left over a little bit of cholent. This guy was by his house for Shabbos. He said, "Could I have shirayim?" And wanted to try to take his bowl. Reb Chaim thought the man is nuts. What's he doing? He's trying to take my leftovers. And he started explaining to Reb Chaim, I want to have shirayim. Reb Chaim had no clue what he was talking about. I asked my little kids today. He said this story in Queens. Right? All my little kids, if everyone's familiar with the Hasidic world, there's a thing of a Rebbe giving over shirayim, leftovers from his eating. There's an Indian. Chaim had no clue. Never heard of it. Didn't think there's any clear-cut makar for it in Kol Torah Kula. If it's not in Torah, Vos Haste Miami, Vos Haste Shirayim. I don't know what Miami is. I don't know what Shirayim is. So this guy introduced him to Shirayim. But the Rebbetzin invited all of these types of people to their house. And I assume they had, in Baruch Hashem, they had mishpacha there, big mishpacha. And I'm sure there are always a lot of people there. They expanded. But there's room in the heart, they had room in the house. But that house, you asked for the room in the house. Do you know that people walk through that house every day? Hundreds, thousands. Insane. So many people went through that house. Up the staircase and around. It's just the access to people. They had to change the whole front of the house for that Levaya, to get in. It's unbelievable. I just want to end with two varts that I don't know for sure if Reb Chaim said them at the Seder, but they're definitely both very appropriate for the Seder. First vart I found in the Sefer Time of the Kra, which is brought, it's Reb Chaim's Torah on Torah Shebeksav, but it's previously printed by his father in the Berchos Paretz. By Makas Tzvardeya. So Chazal say that originally it was one frog. One frog jumped out of the sea, and then Mitzrayim tried to stop it. They hit it, and each time they were hit a frog, it would multiply. So the Stipler asked a very good question. Why did they stop?
Right, it's the obvious
Right?
question.
You see what's going on? They hit the frog, it gets more and more. Each frog, it gets more and more. Why didn't they stop? And the Stipler said a very insightful idea into the human psyche. He says, that's the midah of kas. When you're angry, you do irrational things. They were angry, they were frustrated, there were frogs everywhere. What did they do? They kept on hitting the frog. The frogs are multiplying and making your problem worse. That's what happens when a person gets angry. He turns red, he turns off his head. And that was a lesson the Stipler would give over. Remember I had Luban saying, that was his favorite Dvar Torah. He used to say over to the Haredi Israeli cheder that the yeshiva had. He loved saying over that Dvar Torah. It's a very good message to people. Look, we have to know to control our anger. Look what anger could do. Such silly things like the Makkah of Tzvardeya. But Reb Chaim had his own take on the Makkah of Tzvardeya and a beautiful lesson that he had. He said, the Makkah of Tzvardeya, we know from Chazal that the frogs actually jumped in to the fiery furnaces. They jumped in everywhere. They even went into ovens. So the baker would open up his oven, the pizza guy would open up his oven. They had pizza in Mitzrayim, right? And all of a sudden the frogs would jump out. And obviously, for a frog to do such a thing was a Mesiras Nefesh. We don't find anywhere the frogs are rewarded for that. Chaim said, in contrast, you find when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, well, Yachu Kel Vishonu. None of the dogs made any noise. And because of that, all dogs go to heaven. No, all dogs are rewarded that we give them treifos. We give them the meat that's not kosher. We give to dogs. So Reb Chaim asked, how come when it comes to the dogs, we give them a reward? But what about the frogs? How come we don't honor the frogs? We should give the frogs something.
About the lice.
Right? Okay? We should do something for the frogs. That was Reb Chaim's question. Chaim gave an insightful answer. He says, you know what? It might be easier to jump into a kivshin ha'esh than to keep your mouth shut. A dog holding back from barking. And he applied this to people too. And people holding back from speaking. That's a very tough thing to do. That deserves a super reward. Frogs, fiery furnaces. That's not as impressive as the dogs. Beautiful var from Reb Chaim. And you see how Reb Chaim, with all Kol Torah Kula, he wasn't just giving over the halachas and minhagim, beinon lamakom. If you were around Reb Chaim, if you were there by 23 Rashbam doing B'dikas Chametz, you got a lesson in Shalom Bayis. You got a lesson in Chinuch, giving out candies. And you got a lesson in Musar, in Derech Eretz, of what it means to be in control of yourself, what it means to be careful of what you say. Be'ez Hashem, we should take these lessons from Reb Chaim, each in our own, and it's a big schus when an Adam Gadol is nifter, that I heard someone quote a Yaris Tavash, that the midos of the Gadol, the great things the Gadol has are hefker. They're out there in the world to grab. And if we grab a little bit of Reb Chaim's Hanhagos, if we learn from this and transmit it to the next generation, that should be for us a schus. Chaim should be a Neil Tziyosha for all of us, should protect our generation, and we should all be zocher to a Chag kosher v'sameach in peace and serenity.
Amen.
Thank you very much.